I wanted to do a quick and very impromptu video and very casual, as you can tell. But I'm going to talk today about rigidness and what that looks like in our world of autism. And this is something that I had to learn about, and I had to really take time, and it took time for me to understand what my son's speech therapist was talking about when she would refer to him being very rigid. So I don't know if this goes across the full spectrum of autism, but I do want to talk about it because I do believe that if my son has problems with this, then there's a good chance that someone out there may need a little support and just a little bit of extra knowledge in this area. And I know as I do research and I'm looking through different platforms like YouTube, Instagram, Google, that any kind of help I can get, I take in as much as I can and try to help my son. So this is for you if you're looking for some information about rigidness and some things that you can do. So when my therapist would tell me that my son is rigid, so what that means is what I have learned, what it means for my son is that when he learns something one way, it is very hard for him to translate that across different areas of life. So if he learns something in a therapy setting, let's just give an example. So he's learning a new skill in a therapy setting. Well, that in his brain is to be done in that particular setting and maybe nowhere else. Now, he has come a long way with this, and when he was younger, I did see more rigidness than he has now. He is still prone to that rigid thinking, but he has stretched out of that. So this may be for the parent that has a younger child that is experiencing this to a more degree than maybe if you have an older child that's kind of, I don't know personally, because my son is 7, and I don't know if this is something they do kind of grow out of, like a maturity thing, or if this is something that is to be used as a hands-on approach with therapy and the parent relationship. So if you followed us for any length of time, you know that we homeschool, and a lot of our homeschool involves life skills and social skills and getting things like that in first and putting those things as a first priority above academic skills. So such as math, we incorporate our homeschool in real life situations as far as math, like in the kitchen, measuring cups, using different things, adding 2 eggs to a recipe, and taking things away like that. So let's go back to this idea of rigidness. So when he would learn something one way, he would have a hard time knowing how to use that same skill in a different setting than when he actually learned it. If he learned it in the therapy, maybe he learned the skill at home and he didn't translate that as easy. And again, this was when he was younger. So as we have worked with him and as I have lovingly stretched him out of his comfort zone and these different supports. Okay, so I like to think of my son's schooling as layers. Okay, he requires lots of layers to support. Think about support beams, and so he requires lots of those supports to get him to the level of success that he needs to be based on his numerical age. So when he tests on paper, he does not test as a 7-year-old child. He tests younger based on his receptive and expressive ability. So if you are trying to get your child out of that rigidness and help them apply it, whatever something they're learning in therapy, apply it to different areas of life, you are going to have to provide opportunities for your child to be able to do that. And it's very hands-on. And again, incorporate layers. If it's a skill that something can be learned in a public setting, that's something that you can approach starting in small steps and working your way up to that goal. Maybe your small step is simply getting your child out the door and into the car and into the parking lot of a facility that you need to apply this skill set. That is okay. You have to understand that baby steps are going to get you to that goal. It's not giant leaps. You're not going to get there in one step, not even 2 steps, maybe not even 3 steps. For us, it usually comes in several baby steps to meet that final foundational goal. So keep that in mind as you begin working with your child and applying these skill sets and helping stretch them out of their comfort zone lovingly. And if you have success in getting them safely out the door, into the car, and safely into the parking lot, that is enough. If they cannot cope with getting out of the car and going into the particular facility that you need to introduce this new skill set, that is completely okay. You are doing an amazing job by taking the initiative to get them used to these rhythms of life and how the world works, right? And that's the basic concept that we have applied to our homeschool is I want to equip my son to be confident in a world that doesn't make sense to him. So he has to learn the rhythms of life and those expectations when we go out anywhere, at a playground, at a restaurant, at a library. So these are all different things. Some of them have similar rhythms. Some of them may throw him off completely. A doctor's office, for example. A doctor's office is going to have different rhythms because of the entryway. Let's start with the parking lot. You've got big buildings, usually, in a doctor's office. Well, not usually, but let's just take that as an example because my son, his pediatrician works in a very large building. So this is a completely different environment. This is a completely different rhythm for him. So his rigidness plays into even things like this. So if he's used to just going to one place all the time, that's all he's going to be familiar with is if he goes to one place, one particular setting, that is not going to help stretch him outside of his comfort zone because that is not how our world works. Our world has many different settings, many different places, and many different rhythms. So the doctor's office has a big building. When we go to the parking lot, it's a huge parking lot. Lots of cars, lots of things going on. Getting him used to that, getting him safely in the building. And then once he gets in the building, it's a very open concept plan, which he has always had a hard time coping with. Something else we've had to get him used to and stretch outside of his comfort zone. This particular doctor's office also has 2 options to get upstairs. We have an escalator and we have an elevator. Those are 2 great opportunities to get your child used to those different rhythms. What is an escalator? An escalator looks very scary. What is an elevator? An elevator is very scary to a child that does not understand what the end result is going to be. Getting on an escalator is very intimidating for me. So to a child that has autism and other sensory-related issues, it's going to be very overwhelming. Again, you are keeping in mind these baby steps of life. So do not think that if you get inside that big parking lot and you safely make it inside into this big building that has an open air concept that's glass surrounded and your child has a meltdown. Do not think that you failed because that is a huge success. You safely made it out of your house and into the car. You drove to a location, maybe it's a new location, and that in itself can mix a child up if they're going to an unfamiliar place that they're not used to seeing these certain sights and these rhythms. And you get out of the car in this big parking lot with cars going everywhere, and because it's busy, you safely get inside, which is a huge success in itself. You get inside the building and they just can't cope with the openness, okay? And maybe you have to either carry them if they're small enough. This is what I used to have to do. Or, if they can't do it, they can't do it. And if the people surrounding this particular environment, maybe you could call the front desk and tell them what's happened. And, with my son's pediatrician, I know that she would be completely understanding in that situation. It never had come to that, but I could have easily have seen that happening at any point, which is why I myself had tremendous anxiety before appointments like that. So when you're thinking about building layers to reach the foundation of a certain skill set or a certain goal, whatever it is, if your child is rigid, you are going to have to lovingly stretch them outside of their rigidness and that's their comfort zone. And so when they're learning something in one setting, you're going to have to find opportunities to apply that in different settings. So if they learn something at home, look for ways that you can bring that across the line into the community somehow. Maybe it's a book. Books were a big thing for us, and I wanted my son to love books, and it's still a process. He used to rip them out of my hand because he could not stand the sound of my voice. And so this has been a process. So getting him exposed, one example was taking him to the library where there's tons of books, and that smell, everyone knows that libraries have a very distinctive smell. And so that in itself is a huge sensory input for him. We would go and he would hide under the table for story time. And I so desperately wanted him to be a part of that story time. And it was just too much for him to cope, but I still tried. And we went back a handful of times. And each time, he had a little bit more success, but it was just a lot for him because there was a lot going on and it was a new rhythm. But it was getting him exposed to seeing all those books and that, it's good, and these other kids coming in to listen to a story and letting him visually see that, this is a good thing. So that's another example of stretching them outside their rigidness and their comfort zone. So that's about all I want to talk about today because I've already taken up a little bit more time than I would have hoped, but I do want to try to equip parents and maybe give them some insight on things that they are struggling with, because these are things that we struggled with and that I had to it was a very trial and error process, but we have a tremendous support system with family and friends. And so we had success and people were very understanding in these different situations. And I was very vocal if I needed to be about him having autism. And that made that, the outsiders aware that, this is our world and this is our life and it's different, but we have to try to be okay with the world around us in the sense that, my son has a harder time coping with the way the normal world works, but we want to still try to get him accommodated to, and I guess acclimated to those typical environments, because he would rather not have, right? He was his anxiety would overcome him And so, of course, anxiety makes you want to retreat and not move forward. So, as his mom, I had to tune into that and recognize that, and also know when and how far to stretch him, and when it just wasn't the right time, or when just, we'll try again later. And it happened a lot. But those were just continual steps, continual opportunities, continual exposure, to getting to the point to where he was going to be confident and not have anxiety, or as much anxiety, to be able to meet the goal, the life skill goal, or whatever it is that we were working on. So I hope that helps. Thank you for watching, and subscribe to our channel, because I share many different things just on a lot of times on a whim, and but it's things that come to mind that I pray about, and I hope that I can help someone that may be needing that extra support, or looking like I used to look for help and resources online. So have a great day. Thanks for watching.